Woodrow Coward and John Coward. So we'll start with Woody, born in Cranbrook, BC, 89 years ago. He served for almost 30 years in the Canadian Army, enlisting as a private stretcher bearer in a field ambulance unit in 1939. He also served with the Commonwealth UN Division in Korea in 1953-54. He is one of the few surviving Canadians who participated in the Bobcat series of atmospheric nuclear weapons tests in Nevada in 1957. For the past 25 years, Woody has been a peace activist. And John Douglas Coward, Woody's third son, received a BA from Carleton University in Ottawa and an MA Political Science from UBC. He is here tonight to provide technical assistance for the presentation and to make sure his father stays on topic. So, I'd like to call upon our speakers.
I hope we'll convince you that there is a direct link between global warming and military action. Here's the Vancouver Sun, and it says climate, I forget what day it is, but it's about a week ago. It says climate top concern with youth poll shows 40% of Canadians 19 to 29 list global warming ahead of war as getting ahead at work, or getting ahead at work. And it then goes on to explain how this poll operated. But the poll shows that the youth are of the opinion that global warming is a more serious issue than, in fact, the military situation. Before the night's out, I hope that you will see that they're both the same thing, that they're so inextricably linked together that you cannot put one ahead of the other. Now, these are words taken out of Karl von Clausewitz, who is a German philosopher come historian, from his book on war. And that book, incidentally, is still used in all the staff colleges of the world, as far as I know. And it's I think, a very realistic quote. War is never an isolated act. But why do we have military machines? Because you're going to hear quite a lot about them tonight. To protect us from invasions, and later on you might say, what invasions? You know that the United States invaded Canada in 1812. You know that we have lots of good water. You know that we have good supply of energy. Both of these are commodities the U.S. does not have, and other people don't have. So that you will find out later on that we have to protect ourselves from invasion. We hear a lot about sovereignty, and of course right now the Canadian North is threatened, and we believe that the Northwest Passage is Canadians, it's Canada's. However, there are a lot of countries that don't agree with that, including the United States. From time to time there is the threat to the civil power. And the last time that happened in Canada, I think, was when it was in Quebec, when the people of Quebec, that was in the 1960s, I think, and they called upon the military to support the civil power in Quebec only. And then, of course, we have international conflicts, of which one's going on now in Afghanistan, and it's said that if you have military, you can deter nuclear threats. There are some people who believe that. And I would invite you to the notion that the U.S., who holds military power, have never attacked a country that has the nuclear weapon. That's a fact. Therefore, the juxtaposition here is that if you don't want to be attacked by the USA, get yourself a nuclear weapon. Because if you have one, the U.S. won't attack you because you could retaliate, and the retaliation is a serious thing. Okay, can we go to the next slide then? Now we're looking at historical interactions. The sands of Alamein Desert still have 18 million landmines which were buried by the British 65 years ago in 1942 in World War II. From time to time, some of these mines are detonated and wipe out herds of cattle and camel herders. There are people not yet born who will die from these mines. 80% of mine casualties are civilians, not soldiers, and nearly a quarter of these are children. Now we go to the Gulf War in 2001. Before the Gulf War, Kuwait's desert was very healthy, despite centuries of nomadic grazing and oil development. It supported substantial greenery and wildlife. During the Gulf War, hundreds of producing oil wells were set ablaze. The desert was subsequently coated with the residue that affects water permeability into the areas under the sand, seed germination, and microbial life. Plants are dying still because they cannot breathe through the blackened leaves. It took 10 months to cap the wells, but until they were capped, crude oil was released into the sea, which killed tens of thousands of marine birds and mammals. Oil from the existing wells formed huge petrochemical lakes. Toxic fumes and smoke from burning wells killed migratory birds and aggravate human chest conditions. That's still going on. Now, between 1962 and 1971, in the war in Vietnam, the U.S. sprayed 72 million liters of Agent Orange, a defoliant. It destroyed the coconut trees. The residue produced by this action has resulted in repeated miscarriages in Vietnam women for years, and is still causing miscarriages and physical deformities in children. Perhaps some of you saw the recent report by CBC television of the residual effects of dioxin, a carcinogen which is still in the soil of Vietnam. This toxin has entered the food chain and continues to be the root cause of countless medical problems in Vietnam. In Afghanistan, once consisted of major forest cover. It's awfully difficult. If you can see that view on the left there, that was where the forest used to be. And this has been reduced to 2% by the war activity that's still going on. One of the world's most important bird migratory routes was through Afghanistan. The wars there have reduced this migration by 85%. The U.S. military alone generates a ton of toxic pollution a minute, more than 5 leading industries combined. And in 2004, the U.S. Congress exempted its military from the country's Endangered Species Act, affecting marine animals. Every year, the U.S. military uses enough energy to run all U.S. mass transit systems for 22 years. An aircraft carrier uses 150,000 gallons of fuel a day. A U.S. fighter jet consumes as much fuel per hour as the average U.S. motorist uses in 2 years of driving. There are more than 14,000 contaminated military sites in the U.S., and one of them at Hanford is just a few miles across the border in the state of Washington. There are more than 200 tons of hazardous waste has been dumped in the Philippines. More than 120,000 pieces of unexploded bombs and buried chemical warfare devices were left in the Panama Canal zone by the U.S. forces. When we look at data like this, we have to ask ourselves once again, why do we do this to our environment? It forces us to take another look at the justification for military organizations and search for a better way to resolve international and civil disputes. As climate change starts to affect our stock of resources, such as energy, water, and food, I did mention that states that happen to have a lot of those become targets for those states that have suffered from these things. I think we have to be aware of that possibility. In the past, members and facilities of the armed forces have been called upon to assist the civil power and in ice storms, floods. I think there's some underway right now in Manitoba, but those are events. There will probably be more of them. There will be power outages. There will be hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes, and tsunamis. Now, we want to look at the resources that we have in our military establishment, and I'm going to ask my son John to take over.